you have to look at who is the aggressor here. The aggressor here is the US, and Israel. Those are the people that are trying to destabilize Syria.
Star-spangled banner, side with the snakes. Big guns and big fun, the US of A. Handshakes and mandates, the lies and the hate. Welcome to Israel, the 51st state. Time for some action, people stop debating. Every single day they decrease the population. Inside out, it's an evil operation. Ask whoever you want, it's a legal occupation. America wants to pretend they're helping the children, but they just give Israelis the weapons to kill them. They give them the tanks for wrecking the buildings. The facts always come to light, you can never conceal them. Even as I spit and record this, people die and these evangelical Christians support it, forming an alliance with the Zionist lobby.
Hi, I'm Joshua Blakeney, a journalist and activist based here in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and today is Syrian Independence Day. It was on this day, 66 years ago, that Syria finally extirpated the French occupying troops from their country. That was, of course, April 17th, 1946. And we're going to be talking about Syria in relation to imperialism, 9/11 and a host of other issues with the flower of Syria, who's bloomed into an internet sensation in recent months and weeks. That is, of course, Syrian Girl. Syrian Girl, thanks very much for joining me.
Thank you, the honor is mine.
So please explain the significance of Syrian Independence Day.
Well, as you said, today, but in 1946, the French occupation was finally officially booted from Syria, and Syria gained its independence. The occupation had began after World War One, and it continued for many decades. There was many mercenaries and French soldiers in Syria terrorizing the population for a long time. My grandfather fought personally against the French, and I have another grandfather who was almost killed by a French mercenary, and he was only a 10-year-old boy. So the independence gained is like important for all Syrians, and what actually happened that's similar to what's related to what's happening now is that the flag was changed, and it was changed from the three-starred flag that we're seeing the rebellion carrying now to the current two-starred flag, and that is why we refer to the opposition flag, the three-starred flag, as the mandate flag. And I think it kind of represents the reoccurrence of foreign influence, and French influence being one of them, because one of the loudest opponents of Syria's sovereignty right now is coming from France 24 media station and the French government.
Yeah, that's quite a legacy of colonialism, and of course it was the Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1916 where the British statesmen and French statesmen divvied out the Middle East, and they thought it was their right to decide, who would control the Middle East. And so Independence Day, like you say, was an expression of Syrian sovereignty. And of course today that sovereignty is being jeopardized by big imperial powers. Yet again, history is reoccurring. This time, rather than being Britain and France primarily, I would say it's primarily the US and Israel, with Britain and France serving those imperial interests. So could you tell me a little bit about the contemporary imperial assault on Syrian sovereignty, please?
I definitely agree with you that the main contenders at the moment are Israel and the US. And I find it difficult to distinguish between these two states because their interests are so aligned that they will rarely, if ever, act opposing each other. I think it's clear to me that there's many interests at play here. One of them is to break up the Iran-Syria alliance, because these two countries are the only two countries in the Middle East that actually oppose Israel's power, and I'm not referring to Palestine and Lebanon because Palestine is not really in a state to oppose Israel, and Lebanon is kind of divided on its position when it comes to the government itself. So Iran and Syria are the big two powers that are opposing Israel currently. And they're also, in particular, Iran is opposing the control of flow of imports and exports. Well, it's attempting to rival Israel's control because of its relationship and connection to the Strait of Hormuz and the Caspian Sea. And at the moment, the Suez Canal is the most important thing. And Israel has had control of the Suez Canal. It seems as though the Egyptian uprising might have threatened that, but time will only tell. But Iran is posing a threat both militarily and economically. And I think I heard today that Iran is actually planning to create a canal between running through Iran and to the Caspian Sea to the Strait of Hormuz, which would change the whole picture of geopolitics in the Middle East, if that turns out
That
to
would be a
be
good
true.
thing, of course, because there'd be a balance of power then in the region, right? I think Israel wants to be the sole regional hegemon in the Middle East, have hegemony in the Middle East. But if Iran continues to assert self-determination, which I think they will, in an alliance with a strong Syria, that would be a good thing for the people of the Middle East because it would create some stability and less instability, which of course we've seen in Iraq and Lebanon. The instability leads to genocide, and so could you continue to sort of elaborate on what's happening in Syria? Because of course I'm in Canada here. My media is telling me that President Assad is an evil dictator, that these people who are opposing him are human rights activists, but increasingly Syrian voices such as yours are coming forward and saying that things are more complex. It's not as black and white as that.
That was absolutely going to be my next statement, that they're trying to oversimplify a very complicated situation. And there's an opposition in Syria that is not armed. And it's been there for many, many years. And this armed opposition is something new and has been created by foreign powers, armed and trained, and it uses people who are foreign to Syria, and this includes fighters from Libya and mercenaries from various countries, and it doesn't represent Syria's opposition. It just represents imperialism, and no, it does not have, and hence it doesn't have support from Syria's people. Now, Syria's people, you can't say that everybody dislikes the government, and you can't say that everybody likes the government. I can't tell you what is in the majority. I can only tell you from what I can see that the biggest mass rallies that have happened, millions strong, have been pro government or pro reforms. And I think that indicates very strong support for the government, whether that is whether the people like it or not. You can't just ignore that, and people should, if it's really about what the majority of people want and what Syrians want, then they would pay attention to that. But the media hasn't been paying attention to that. What we've been being sold is that peaceful protesters are being shot at by the government, when in reality, half of the people who have died actually have been Syrian soldiers, and they've been shot at by armed, trained insurgents who act usually close to the borders of Turkey Lebanon, and sometimes Jordan as well. It's definitely a different picture to what's being painted, and there have been opposition. Sorry, excuse me.
Bless you.
There have been opposition rallies in Syria that have gone smoothly and without a shot fired. But at the same time, we have this large insurgency hell bent on creating a Islamic state. These forces are quite sectarian in nature. They oppose the government not because it's not a Western-style democracy. They oppose it because it is, in their eyes, an apostate country because it is secular, so it's non-religious, and it's supposedly got a lot of Alawites in it.
What you're articulating to me is that the Western governments appear to be standing in solidarity with Islamic fundamentalists and Islamic fundamentalists who actually engage in terrorism, so they could be characterized as Islamist terrorists. And yet the whole war on terror, we're told, is premised on a secular West combating such groups. And Assad's apostasy is the fact that he's secular, it would appear. And so the whole analysis when it comes to Syria is topsy-turvy. Why would the Canadian government and the Australian government and the British government and the United States government want to be sponsoring Islamist terrorists?
Because the whole idea that they're against extremist Islam is a sham. They supported it in Afghanistan. They support it whenever it suits them. They pretend to be secular whenever it suits them. They pretend to be anti-Islamic whenever it suits them too. And the CIA is just another one of their controlled opposition tools. And if you look at its history, the only thing it's ever done was, as a so-called group, is promote the U.S. interests, and it's basically killed far more Muslims than it ever did any other supposedly any other religion. So basically, the West are being fed garbage. The governments of the world, America, Canada, they don't really care about religion or ideology. Whatever suits them to gain more power is the ideology of the day. And even in their own media, they've admitted that there are elements of the so-called Al-Qaeda in this Syrian insurgency that they're supporting, but they don't mind. In fact, I think in some ways they would like to see all the secular governments in the Middle East cut out, because it's far more easier to divide people when you have one religion controlling others. And I haven't completely considered all of the reasoning behind this, but according to me, it's obvious that all of the secular states are being cut out, Libya being one of them. So, if I may, I just have to gather my thoughts.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, yeah, sorry, did you remember your thought?
There was one thing. Yeah, I just wanted to make one other statement. The Western propaganda is now saying something along the lines of, you have to support the revolution in Syria as it defends women's rights. I find this highly idiotic, and I've seen it before. Also, before the Iraq War, they were saying the same thing. And this movement, this insurgency, is going to do everything against women's rights. And women at the moment in Syria have the same rights as men.